Okay, we're going to be dealing with managing the process. It's a cross-section of the PROCs. The folks that we have on this is from the NPRC is Art Sparks. He's with Alexander Thompson Arnold, and he's a Compliance Assurance Committee member. We have from Texas, Mason Andrews. He's with Thompson & Thompson, and he is the PROC chair in Texas. We have Wib Wright with Wright CPA Group, and he is the PROC chair from Mississippi. And we have Mike Gibson from Oklahoma, and as of July 1, he is the PROC chair. So I think his name tag must have gotten made before July 1. But what we're going to do is we're going to entertain questions from the audience, and actually I've got some questions here to get started with if we don't have any from the audience. But first, I would like for Art to discuss the NPRC process so that everyone understands that process before we go into the process at the PRB level.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate Jim Brackens this morning. He sort of cut short and said, Art will take care of all the questions. Well, I'm going to try to talk as long as I can. That way there won't be as many questions. I'm kidding. There are 674 firms that have their peer review administered by the NPRC. Of those 674, 23 of those require full committee approval once they're done. Of the 23, 9 have panels. Now, what are these panels? We actually have members of the NPRC that form a panel that oversees the peer reviews of obviously the larger CPA firms or those firms that ask to have a panel. The purpose of the panel is to second guess really and consult with the reviewing firm and the team captains. The panels go through and we review the selection of engagements, selection of offices. We make sure that there is adequate coverage. We go through and really have meetings on a periodic basis, a regularly periodic basis, and I know it's redundant, but quite a few meetings to discuss the progress of the peer review, any problems that they're coming across. We discuss any MFCs, whether we think those things should be elevated to an FFC or to a deficiency, and then are ultimately involved with the final report, the exit conference, and so on and so forth. So there are actually members of the NPRC that are not part of the firm doing the peer review, or obviously the firm being peer reviewed, that are part of the process to simply oversight it. One of the purposes of these panels is when you get a firm in which there may be 600 to 1,000 engagements selected for oversight, you don't want to get all the way through those 600 engagements and decide, you know, we don't really think those 600 engagements have appropriate coverage. Now, at the local level, and I'm on the Tennessee peer review committee, it's very easy for us to go back and say, I really don't like the coverage that I saw. We want you to pick up another yellow book, or we want you to pick up another employee benefit plan because maybe you looked at a couple of defined benefits and did not look at a voluntary health care or something like that. That's sort of easy to do when you only have to look at one engagement. If we were to come along as an NPRC committee and say, well, we want you to look at another 100 engagements, these 100 over here were really not that important, that would be very difficult. So that's why we are involved with this process really from the beginning to the end. Some of these peer reviews last for 9 months. These are not 1 or 2 days that they're in there. Some of them go 7, 8, 9 months. We actually had one because of various and sundry reasons went 18 months from beginning to the end because of different opportunities, let's say. We have routes, just like the administering entities do for the states. One of the differences that we have, and And I think Paul Brown brought up that they have 5 RABs, but they are consistent RABs, as we do in Tennessee. The RABs that we have are chosen from the membership of the NPRC on a random basis. We don't have the same 4 or 5 guys in each RAB in which all of a sudden I'm on there with Alan Long and I know what his hot points are, so I stay away from him if I'm presenting the RAB. We actually rotate, and you're going to have different people each time. You're going to have different people, obviously, with different size firms each time, from the big 4 down to a smaller firm like I have. As far as the NPRC and oversight and things like that, arguably 100% of the firms are oversighted. All of the firms are oversighted. Now let me tell you the asterisk to that. I'm doing an NPRC peer review this coming Monday with one of my partners. At the end of the day, I will send 100% of the working papers to the AICPA for their review. Not just the SRM, which is the summary review memorandum, or not just the MFCs and the FFCs. I will send all of the engagement checklist also. All of my little notes that I've made on there about, well, I need to double check this to make sure it's right, all of those things go to the AICPA, and I can assure you that the staff that are involved with this engagement that I'm going to be doing Monday will call me several times asking, okay, your little handwritten note out here, what exactly did you mean by that? And I will have to relive this as to exactly what I meant on that engagement. So arguably, every working paper that I do as a firm doing a peer review, because it's an NPRC firm, is looked at, no arguably about it, they are looked at by the AICPA staff, and that doesn't mean 1 or 2 people. They're all looked at by the staff. So that is a little bit different from from some of the others. We being Mark Hobbs, which Mark is not here right now. I was going to suggest that if you had anything to throw, you throw it at him because he would probably be closer to you. But we are part of the NPRC. I am part of the RAB. I will present firms. I may present one of the firms or 2 of the firms at the RAB. And when I say present, the staff does not present them. We present them. And then there is very good discussion by all the RAB members about the different reviews that are done. So I am not a PROC person in that I am part of the NPRC. Okay. Now, how many reviews do we look at, we being Mark and myself, so we can have a warm fuzzy feeling, as we say here in Tennessee, about what the different RABs and what the PROC is doing? And I got these statistics last month, from July 1st of 2012 to May 15th of 2013, there were 190 engagements looked at. Mark and I, either collectively or individually, set in on 123 of those, or 65%. That's a pretty high percentage, obviously, of the engagements. And again, we're liable to have a large firm all the way down to the small firm. These do not include any that we sit on, obviously, of the 23 that have to come before the full committee. So you could add those 23 into that, and obviously not all 23 are done in 1 year. If you say a third, then about 8 of them. So an even higher percentage we end up looking at. What are our statistics? Our statistics are very, very similar to the statistics that are presented in the Oversight Task Force report by the AICPA. I think the AICPA has 89 system reviews. And by the way, we have some engagement reviews at the NPRC, and that may surprise you, but we actually do. The AICPA has 89% pass. They have 9% pass with deficiency and 2% fail. The NPRC, and I could argue that we've got larger firms. I mean, and although we have some smaller firms like us, or some firms that only have 10 or 12 professionals, our failure rate has been 3%. Our pass with deficiencies has been 6%, and our pass is 91%. Now, I'm taking those figures strictly from the ones done from July 1st of 2012 through May 15th of 2013. If they vary, they will not vary significantly. So what we see is pretty close to the same statistics that we're seeing through the AICPA report. Again, probably from the big firms, you guys with the state board and the NPRC, you're concerned about what happens with the big firms. You're concerned about the smaller firms too, to make sure that we don't just say this is a small firm, let's just sort of pass over that. It gets the same scrutiny, I promise you, that the big firm has. Maybe not as long a scrutiny because of the number of engagements, but it does. The larger firms with the panels that are there, and again, these guys are independent and actually report back to the committee, with the panels that are had on the larger firms, and the fact that it's presented before the full board, and again, I can assure you that there's active discussion and participation by all the committee members. We feel like that those things are vetted pretty well.
Thanks, Art. Does anyone have any questions with Art with regard to the process and what's being done from an oversight perspective at the NPRC? Because some of these other questions that we have, Art will sort of be excluded from because they won't really pertain to him probably.
Alan, I forgot to mention one other thing. The oversight that I've been talking about is the oversight of the engagements in the process. We also had an individual who is a past peer review board member come in and oversight the administrative side of this. We are a little different. We don't really worry about firms not or out there doing work and not in the peer review, because ours, you either have to be in there because you do public work or it's voluntary that you're in there. So some of that, Alan, we don't have to worry about as much. That's
Okay.
y'all's problem, or the state board's problem, really.
Has anyone got any questions with regard to this process? Because I know a lot of us, having not dealt with NPRC and actually having been, even when it was SECPS and even before this did not really probably understand the full process of what they went through. So, you know, if we got any questions for Art right now, I'd like to try and entertain those before we move forward.
And I'll interrupt again. Mark and I consider ourselves to be regulators on this thing. We are part of the process, but we consider ourselves to be regulators. Both Mark and I are former state board members. Both Mark and I are former peer review board members. I am a former member of the oversight task force of the peer review committee, and I've been on the Tennessee Society peer review committee, either as chair. They finally kicked me off from that, not as chair, for most every year since we've had it, other than when I was on the State Board of Accountancy.
Any questions? Yes.
Not a question, Alan. I was just wondering if maybe Art, or maybe more appropriate for Janice, to comment a little bit more of the role that the CAC is playing in this regard.
Janice, you want to take this one?
Because the oversight of NPRC is not done in exactly the same manner as by the AICPA as it is done for other administering entities. the Compliance Assurance Committee, through reports from Art and Mark, and they do report to us. We have a face-to-face meeting once a year, which was yesterday, and we also have committee calls 3-4 times a year. At every committee call, Mark and Art are given opportunity to report to the Compliance Assurance Committee their observations as participants in the NPRC. But they are giving us those reports as regulators. And they are doing the similar process that we are asking PROCs to do across the United States, is to attend RAB meetings, make a judgment call as to whether or not they believe the RABs are performing in the manner that they're supposed to be. To this date, we have gotten very positive reports from them. Then we also are provided statistics from the AICPA as to the number of RABs that each of them has set on, the types of reports they're seeing, and one of the things that excuse me, Art has stressed to us is they do not in any form feel that they are being given selected engagements. They've participated in fail engagements, pass with deficiency engagements, as well as pass. They're not being, because they sit on the NPRC as regulator seats, they are full participants in the process. So they're not sitting there just as participants. They wear two hats. So does that answer the question, Jim, or does that give the information you were looking for?
And to go a little further, we participated on 73% of the pass with deficiencies. We only participated on 33% of the fails, but because of where we stand, I talked with the AICPA people, and I actually looked at 100% of all the fail reports and the working papers that were there. So again, we have a pretty good percentage, we think.
Yes.
Hi, Dave Dennis from Florida. We actually just passed peer review. We're starting to write the rules. Actually, we're going to start next week. So I'm interested if there's anything we should be thinking about interacting with the Florida board or any individual board interacting with the NPRC.
I think what you have to do is step back and look at the system that is being used and trust what the AICPA is doing and what the CAC is doing and what we're doing as regulators. I truly believe that the worst thing that could happen would be for Florida or Tennessee or Kentucky or somebody to decide, well, we want to oversee the NPRC, because I think at that point in time the effectiveness of the oversight would be very difficult and very difficult to accomplish. I think you have to trust the system with the CAC.
So recommendation that we would be silent in rules vis-a-vis the NPRC?
I think you should be silent, but at the same time, I think it's a responsibility of the board, of the PROC, of somebody to review the reports that are issued by the AICPA and by the NPRC on what's going on.
And the Compliance Assurance Committee 2 years ago issued our report based on what our process is with the NPRC. Last year we did not issue a report. There were some things that we just needed to get in place. We've been working on that this year. We do plan to issue a report from the Compliance Assurance Committee based on the observations and information from our two regulators who sit on the NPRC. We will be issuing that report through, I believe, October for the past 2 years, and hopefully that report will be out by January. And then from that point forward, we do plan to issue that report on an annual basis. So hopefully that report would give you some assurance that at least there is an oversight process going on. And we would be happy to entertain if you have any suggestions, we'd be happy to look at those suggestions. Someone else?
Carl Williams from Hawaii. As a regulator, sitting in on a RAB committee, how can you be sure you're not getting too much information on a firm that you may later be sitting in judgment on?
Art, I'll answer. Art and Mark are not current regulators.
Right.
They are past regulators. So they are not current board members. The individuals, one of the criteria for the individuals selected by NASBA and given for nomination is that they are not current board members. Is that correct, Jim? One of the criteria for the member serving on the NPRC as a regulator, quote, regulator representative is that they are not a current sitting board member.
Absolutely, because it's
Okay.
really trying to mirror as closely as we can what happens with a PROC, where a PROC cannot have a current board member because of that fiduciary responsibility. Just to avoid the problem was just mentioned. How could you possibly be, judging on a firm that you may have coming before you for an investigation? That's the other side of that is how could he, if he saw a problem with a firm, if he was on a board, how could he not turn that board over to an investigator? I mean, it's a fiduciary responsibility. So no, that's exactly right, Janice.
Have another in the back of the room.
Yeah, just for clarification, the two representatives who sit on MPRC, who have the regulation background, are you voting members of MPRC?
We are. Yes, we are. We are full participating members of the NPRC, which again is different from most PROCs that are out there.
So the, sorry to keep, so the PROC members then who sit in on RABs should be advising the Board of Accountancy on how the process is working, but not on any individual peer reviews. Is that what I'm led to understand?
Mason, you want to answer that?
Yeah.
Stated that again. I thought you were directing it to him, and I was sitting here. I was still smarting from the fact I've run into some old friends here today. They've all walked up to me and a man said, "Are you still working?" Yeah. State it again, please.
Just to confirm then that the PROC member sitting in a RAB who is advising the Board of Accountancy or giving him should be commenting to the board only on process, not on specific peer reviews.
That's what we do in the state of Texas.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And if
James.
if I could clarify, that is also the same process that Mark and Art use in MPRC. They do not report anything to us about any firm. It is purely at this level up here, not at the detail level of firms.
That's one of the reasons for the confidentiality
Yes.
agreements.
Yeah, in Mississippi, we can't report to the board any firm details, names, or anything else as far as the actual reviews are concerned.
And it's the same in Oklahoma.
Any other questions?
Although a lot of our firms, their peer review gets made public on the larger ones.
Any other questions for Art on the NPRC? If not, we'll start in on some of the pre-designed questions we had here for the other three members.
And I
we'll
will
leave
be
the
here,
other-
Alan, if they have any questions that they just want to ask one-on-one.
Okay, Art said he'll be around, and he'll be around at lunch and after. If you've got any individual questions that you want, that you maybe don't feel like you want to throw out to the group or whatever, he'll be more than happy to try and answer those questions for you. I want to ask the other three board members, if they, or other three panel members, if they would answer a couple of questions here to get the thing started. And I'd like for each one of you to answer, because we've tried to choose members here that are from a large state, sort of a medium-sized state from peer review perspectives, and a smaller state.
Who's the small state?
I think you are.
Okay.
What do you all consider to be the advantages of establishing a PROC? We'll start with you, Mason.
In the state of Texas, we're a little bit different. We are a peer, as you well might imagine, we are called a peer review oversight board. We have been appointed by the Texas State Board of Public Accountancy to be compensated to oversee the process of peer reviews in the state of Texas via approving sponsoring organizations to do peer reviews in the state of Texas. And at this point, that's the AICPA and the National Peer Review Committee. The Texas Society of CPAs is structured very much like the National Peer Review Committee. They have paid technical staff who look at all peer reviews that come through the state of Texas in detail. We, as a PROB, give assurance to the Texas State Board by sampling those work papers and reports using 8 criteria that we've established over 22 years. We look at those things in detail ourselves, so the Texas State Board gets assurance from us that there is uniformity and that we feel like that there is the due process is going on in the peer review process.
Okay, Wib?
In Mississippi, we are, the Peer Review Oversight Committee, it was formed by the state board so we could have a kind of a seamless interaction between the Mississippi Society, who administers the peer review program, and the state board, who's required to make sure everybody has their peer review for licensing. We are compensated up to 40 hours, and the main advantage, as I see of it for the state, is that there's not any duplication of work. They don't have to hire somebody to do what we do other than on a part-time basis, I guess is what you could call us. And it's just a lower cost for the state board. And one of the disadvantages for the state board is they're relying on an outside party, which is us. And I'll tell you some of the disadvantages of that is we have 3 members, and in our case, 2 of us work and 1 of us doesn't. So you've got to be real careful when you're selecting the members that and monitor them to make sure that they stay active.
Hey, Mike?
Thanks. In Oklahoma, our purpose, and I think the advantage is that we're, I guess, created by by rule under the Oklahoma Accountancy Board's rules to assist in monitoring the peer review program, to provide oversight of the administering entities, and basically provide the Oklahoma Accountancy Board with assurances that the peer review program that it's established is that the standards are being met and that the process is being followed. So,
Any questions at this point? I want y'all to talk a little bit about the purpose of the PROC, and I think we've covered on this already, but that the purpose is not to deal with failed reports, but it's to oversee the process. And Mike, I'll let you start with that. So,
and that's really the most important thing that we do. One of the we will go. There are 3 members of our committee, and we're required by our bylaws and the rule to attend the Oklahoma Society's peer review committees and observe the RAB process and sit in on each of the RAB sessions and listen, monitor, observe what they're doing, and then we report that back to the Oklahoma Accountancy Board. We also meet 4 times a year, usually by conference call, but the Oklahoma Accountancy Board will send us all of the reports and everything that we need to do it, and then we'll have a conference call and we'll discuss everything. And one of the things that we do is discuss the process that we've observed. The technical reviewer, the findings, the FFCs, MFCs, and how the monitoring and remediation plan also for past with deficiencies and failed reports.
Wib?
Yeah, we have 3 members, and they're picked by geographic locations, one in the north part of the state, one in the central, one in the southern part of the state. And we either a lot of our meetings are done by teleconference, so we, at least one of us is always on the teleconference for the meetings. We attend the RAB meetings, and one of us, and then we do administrative work during the year. Every year we go and we basically do what the AICPA does on their administrative trips. We do that every year, even when the year they come. And we check the filings, we reconcile the information that's provided by the State Society on Participation and pass-fail rates, recompute all that and reconcile that with the state board. And we also we look at the reports and the state societies when they're monitoring the peer reviewers. We look at their peer reviews. So we try to become involved in the whole process. And then we issue a report at the end of the year, and we meet with the society, the state board, and we go over that report. And it's a pretty long process, and it takes a lot of work, but I think it helps the board in that they have some confidence in what is going on in the committees.
Mike, I want to back up just one thing. Do you all issue a written report to the board?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes, annually.
Okay. Mason.
We don't focus so much on reports themselves. We're focused on the process and whether or not the RABs are functioning and looking at the peer reviews in the way they should be and coming to what we think is the right answer. And let me kind of back up a minute. There are three of us as well, and I said we're compensated, but we can't vote in the RABs. We can only listen, oversee, interject our comments, and most of the time they ignore us anyway. But but we can't insist upon them coming to a conclusion that we feel like more represents the process itself. So we're not focused so much on reports. We just want to assure the state board that the peer reviews are being done in accordance with standards in the state of Texas. And that requires a lot of time because there are a lot of peer reviews done in the state of Texas. And 100 hours is probably a pretty good estimate of the amount of time we three put in.
Anyone have any questions with regard to what the purpose of the PROC is? It's not really to deal with failed reports. It's to look at the process, to make sure that the process is working appropriately. And that's the verify piece that we've talked about a couple other times today, is, we're not going in there to change their stuff or to bring failed reports or pass with deficiency reports back to the boards. It's to make sure that the board then can feel comfortable with that the process for peer review is working and working appropriately in your jurisdiction. Okay, guys, who are the best people to serve on a PROC? Consider their experience, expertise in any particular industry, and also note that PROC guidelines recommend non-board members. So, Mason, I'm going to let you take that one to start with.
Well, we, as I said, we started over 20 years ago. And the state board appointed two in public practice and one public member. That public member was an attorney. And we were just in the beginning process of designing programs to help us to perform these procedures. And I must admit, he was trying his very dead level best, but he had no clue about this profession, none whatsoever. And as I told him many times, I don't want to be in the legal process myself, either on your side of the courthouse or on mine, but we feel like that people in public practice are the ones that are going to be able to assess this process more clearly. We have had two public members on there, one from academia, a very smart lady, PhD, head of an accounting department of a very prestigious university, had no clue about public practice whatsoever. And so the state board, we didn't recommend this. They, through their own procedures, finally settled on three of us in public practice. Although one of my members has grown long hair and has moved to Galveston, Texas, and lives on the beach. He's sitting in the back of the room back there. But we feel like that works in Texas.
Okay. Mike, let you go.
Okay. Let's see. Our members, we have three members, and one of the requirements is that they must be licensed. Two of the three members must be qualified reviewers, but they don't have to be active reviewers. I'm not an active reviewer, but I am qualified to serve as a team captain on a peer review. I've attended the training. I agree with what Mason said, that to administer a peer review process, I think you have to have a good understanding of the process And so, and Oklahoma has gone in that direction of having CPAs, licensed professionals, people that understand. One of our members is not in public practice, but is an internal auditor for a large municipality. So he understands the audit process as well. So I believe that's the best direction for a PROC members to be. I mean, at least that's the way Oklahoma has gone, so.
Well, I know this morning that it was also mentioned, Janice mentioned in her slides in our session in here, that even though it said two CPAs or professional members and one public member, I know you all were talking about possibly changing that slide, or maybe it was Jim Bracken said that this morning, so. But, Wib.
In Mississippi, we have 3 members, and they can't be state board members or employees of the state board, so they have to be independent. They can't be a member of the Society Peer Review, Professional Conduct or Ethics Committees, or the AICPA Ethics Committee. And we serve 3-year terms, and you got to be a CPA in Mississippi, and you have to have A&A experience at a partner level, and you have to be a member of the Mississippi Society or the AICPA. And that's basically what we have. We don't require that you be peer review capable, but that's something I think that should be a requirement.
Can I follow up? And Mississippi sounds very much like Oklahoma's. One difference I noted is that our experience level is not partner level, it's supervisory level. So a manager, say in an audit firm, could serve. And that was really the only difference, other than we do require 2 of the 3 members to be peer review qualified.
What do you think the risk rewards are for a minimum versus maximum PROC activities? Wib, I'll let you take that one.
Thank you for that one. I'm the small state. The
Well, the other 2 guys will get the answer too. So.
Right. I think the rewards for maximum are greater because maximum PROC activity gives greater assurance to the state board and the other people who are using our information that there's a greater assurance and there's greater activity in monitoring. I think that from a minimum of activity, that I just don't see any great reward to that other than maybe that you're saving time and effort. But I don't see much in the way of reward from the minimum.
Mike?
Well, I agree with Wib. I mean, if you're establishing a PROC and only want to put the minimum effort into it, you're probably only going to get the minimum effort out of it. Now, I don't, Mason said that they spent 100 hours. I don't believe our PROC members spent 100 hours, so not even
You probably didn't have 1,600 reviews you monitored last year.
No. But I mean, we do spend a fair amount of time. I think we spend the appropriate amount of time both in our on-site visits to observe the RAB process and then in our meetings to discuss what we see and discuss the remediations that have been recommended by the RAB. And then the OAB helps draft the report that we all review and discuss that. So I think that I think we've found a very good balance. I wouldn't describe it as maximum amount of time, but I would describe it as very effective amount of time. So.
Mason?
Did you get the questions before the thing? I didn't get these. I guess I look at this as having gone back in this process to the very, very beginning. I don't mean Noah or anything like that, but the very start of peer review. But I look at it and remember that we as a profession were being attacked by members of Congress and others who wanted to regulate us with the same amount of efficiency they regulate everything else, I suppose. And, you know, we came up with voluntary peer review, and not to give you a whole history of this thing, but peer review became our shield, if you will, to say that, you know, we're able to improve ourselves. So to me, the return on my time and investment in those of my associates that serve with me, I think we serve from that basis, that we are performing an additional layer of assurance that we as a profession can police ourselves. We don't need any outside help. We are a profession. We're a proud profession. We perform a public service. So I think that assurance is what keeps us going. Plus, they do compensate us very well.
You got into my next question here, Mason. Budgetary constraints. How this affects your PROC and/or how you have overcome this issue, and are your PROC members volunteers or paid members? Mason.
Well, I've already said we're paid. And the expense reimbursement runs along the state guidelines. I couldn't live in a motel that they would reimburse for. In fact, I was fixing to submit one here not long ago, and I thought, I can't find a motel like that in Dallas. And the only time we travel is to Dallas because we meet twice a year, one-on-one with the whole committee. So the amount of compensation in terms of budgetary constraints, we're never in on that conversation. I can only say that they were very liberal in the amount that they paid us, and they continue to stand behind us, but we continue to serve them we hope, in a very efficient manner, and we give them comprehensive reports on an annual basis.
Okay. Wib.
Mississippi's a small state and we have budget problems, but we're compensated. They'll pay $60 an hour up to 40 hours, which is not my going rate. But and they pay expenses for travel at the state reimbursement rates. But as far as I'm concerned, in my membership on the committee, I don't look at it as anything I'm trying to make money on. It's more of a public service, and I probably don't turn in nearly as much time, so it's not a problem with me as far as being a member of the PROC, because I don't think those of us who are on it, except maybe Mason, are looking for the money. So we're doing it as a public service. But, you know, the higher you, if you're capable of compensating people, I think you wind up getting more people to volunteer.
Mike.
In Oklahoma, we're compensated as well. Colin, our deputy director, tells me he has a hard time getting his invoices from me. So, because I agree with Wib, I'm not doing it for the money. I appreciate the fact that the Oklahoma Accountancy Board and its rules agreed to compensate, and it's a fair rate. It's $150 an hour, and so I appreciate that, and I know our fellow members appreciate that. But it's certainly not something that I'm doing for that. I didn't do it thinking, oh wow, this is a great way to help build up firm revenues. So
You're moving to Oklahoma, right, Wib?
I'm in Oklahoma.
Yeah, no, I said Wib's going to move to Oklahoma,
Yeah.
so you get that 150
Right.
instead of 60. So.
Yeah. So it is a service. I agree with also what Wib said, that you're going to get people more interested if they know that, because we meet during the day. It's in the middle of the afternoon, and so I'm taken away from client service or other firm, and so it's very nice that I think it shows what the OAB, Oklahoma Council Board, thinks it's important enough, that this PROC is important enough that its members should be compensated.
Alan,
Yes.
can I add one comment?
Sure.
I know that Mike and the other committee members on our committee do not turn in all of their hours, because the board receives an annual report each year, and I can divide what they're paid by the 150, and I know that they are not billing 100% of the time they spend. But, peer review committees through our societies, through the administering entities, all have volunteers. And I know that many of the states are under tight budget constraints. They don't necessarily have, our three panelists here are all being paid, but we know that there are several states for which PROC members are not paid. They have gone out and been fortunate to find volunteers that were willing to do this to give back to the profession. So there are individuals out there. We could have taken that same stance in Oklahoma, and I think we would have still been able to have found good quality people, maybe the very same people that are serving today, because as Mike said, I don't think that the money, he can probably make more than that in his firm doing audit review. But what I don't want this, because the three panelists are from states that pay, I want you to know there are states that have volunteers that serve on these committees. And one of the things that you might consider for those of you that are getting started is to call the society and get a list of individuals who have served but are no longer serving on the peer review committees for the societies. I mean, that's actually how we got our newest member, is I called and said, you know, who's gone off the committee? And I was sent a list. And those individuals might still be willing, because they volunteered their time to work through the society, they might be willing to work through the board. So I just want to throw that out, because it does happen that all 3 of the states that were asked to participate are paid, but all of them are not. So,
Janice, I'll tell you that the CAC, NPRC representatives are paid south of what WIB makes by about $60 an hour. Is that-
You're paid what you're
I
worth,
hear
Art. Any questions? Need a microphone here?
From a small population state perspective, I think Montana, I know Wyoming, we go through the Nevada Society is our A&E for our state. And as we're ramping this up, I'm wondering, has there been a model that maybe 3 or 4 states would pool or work together in a PROC type situation, so that same entity is not getting hit by multiple states requesting, doing the same information? I don't know if that model is been seen or thought of.
Janice?
it's definitely been thought of. Oklahoma does South Dakota reviews, like you all have Nevada do yours. And we've been working and talking with them and trying to get them to come together with us and bring an individual. We're only asking them to bring one individual. We have 4 meetings a year at the Oklahoma Society that their RABs meet. So if we could get South Dakota to participate in one of those meetings, then Oklahoma would cover South Dakota's reviews that are handled in the other 3 meetings. We would work together and issue a joint report to both states. And AICPA does not have a problem with that. In fact, New England, could you address that, Jim? How many? There are 4 states.
Yeah, there's 4. I mean, I don't know of a move there to do something similar. We support, I mean, I was just going to echo, we absolutely support that. We would love to see that model being implemented somewhere. Like Janice has been trying to do it there. You know, Dan, we'd love to see it done in your area as well.
Because that would, I mean, we don't have to recreate the wheel each state. I mean, you all have the prime example there with 4 states involved to be able to provide one person from each of the 4 states, develop the PROC. Now, you would have to get those 4 states to write their rules and regulations to be similar so that you could do that. But I think that's absolutely a method that should be used in order to reduce the costs. So. Well, I didn't. I'm glad you said that, not me. Yeah. So, all right.
Wendy?
What level of involvement does the board staff have in the PROC? Do any executive directors, are they involved at all, or were they at one point in time?
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I'll start. I mean, in terms of what we actually do and decide, no. But in terms of just administering what it is we need and all the information we get, it's totally valuable. I mean, we do most of our meetings by conference call, and at least 2 weeks before the conference call, we'll receive by electronically everything that we need. And so it's all laid out, the agenda and everything is you know, in order and stuff. And so and then the information updates that we get continually. So the board staff does an excellent job of giving us everything that we need, and they're all on the calls as well. Always the deputy director, sometimes the executive director. But as the members of the PROC, as we discuss things, we'll ask them for clarification questions. Have we seen this before? Do we? And they'll have those answers. But when it comes to time to saying, okay, yeah, we agree with what the society did, or and we're ready to move on, they're not involved in that decision-making process.
Do they attend RAB meetings?
No. In Oklahoma, this is recent change. If no member of the PROC can attend a RAB meeting, then a representative of the OAB will. But that's the only reason why that would happen. A staff, yes, I'm sorry, a staff member of the OAB will, not a board member, a staff member. So,
I have another question. If
Go ahead.
I guess, has there been an example of some time when you've reported on something or you didn't agree with something that was going on at the society, or an issue that you've had that maybe what the resolution was or how you addressed it maybe?
Mason?
Wendy, we have that fairly often. At least three of us will have different views on these things, but we do disagree with the committee RAB members on many instances. We voice our concerns then. But unless it becomes something that looks like it's a systemic issue within the RAB itself or with the RAB member, that's where it stays. I mean, we don't report that person to the state board, or I may make a comment to the head of the TSCPA's peer review guy that he might ought to watch this fellow. He seems to be a little weak, but nothing formal. Nothing formal.
In Mississippi, when we attend the meetings, we don't make any comments in the meetings, but we do talk to the chair. When we attend the RAB meetings, we'll talk to the chair of the peer review committee and say, you know, we think this person or this is a lot like what Mason had to say. You know, we'll make some suggestions, but we don't bring up anything actually in the meetings.
Now, Wendy, there have been times, in fact, the last face-to-face meeting we had in Dallas, there was a review presented, and I absolutely could not believe that the RAB member was recommending a change in the type of report based on the facts that we had. And the staff member for the Texas Society said, well, he agreed and felt like that there should be an additional sample that I thought looked like it was insanity. And so, unlike these fellows, we do speak up, even though, as I said, they sometimes ignore us. But I did speak to that fact, and I put my case out there pretty forthrightly, and I ended up by saying, but that's only my opinion, and they did change it. But I have to this day, don't know why they headed down that path. I heard somebody say this morning that maybe, you know, personal relationships, oh, I know that firm, or that kind of thing came into the mix, but I don't know that it did at this point. But that's probably the most dramatic example I can think of, but it didn't go any farther than that. Well, I take that back. I did mention to the head of the peer review staff at TSCPA that a member of his staff had made that decision, and what he did with it, I don't know.
Thank you.
Jim?
I appreciate everything you said, and I think it's all good. I mean, it's the point that you're observing issues. Kind of the analogy I want to make is that's sort of if an auditor was out, doing an audit of a commercial client and they saw certain issues and such, they would bring it to the client's attention. It wouldn't get to the report. Similarly, I haven't heard any of you say that there's been an issue that when you've made your formal reports to the board that you have found any issues. In other words, that you find things or suggestions. We all see that. We all, like to have improvement. But you have not had an issue. I think what Wendy might have been getting to is where you have formally reported to your Board of Accountancy that there is a problem here.
There's a break in the system.
Yeah.
Well, on one occasion.
Well, it's got to be Texas.
I forgot. We did, not with Texas Society, but we had another sponsoring organization, and we did report to them that they withdraw the sponsorship.
We're going to get back on time on our schedule.